No taxation without representation. This political slogan became a rallying cry as American colonists expressed their discontent with Great Britain during the American Revolution. Ultimately, American colonists fought for rights of independence, sovereignty, and self-governance from Great Britain in the late 1770s, thereby ending the tyranny associated with taxation without representation. War and money go hand in hand throughout history. Just as the victors of war write history, those in power have determined the definition of money. We humans have created the concept of money. We have printed it and raised taxes to finance wars, and to this day we spend billions of dollars to secure the values established in the original Constitution. While we may not have the same war in the traditional sense today, we see great ideological differences and political battles in the United States over the very same issues of power, taxation, and money. In the last 2 years alone, the United States government has increased the money supply by more than 37%, thereby devaluing the US dollar for every person and country who relies on it as a store of value for conducting daily business. As asset prices have increased correspondingly with the inflated money supply, we now see scrutiny from politicians about what fair share is. Some politicians have gone so far to propose that wealth taxes be enacted to capture unrealized gains from high net worth individuals.
That would impose a tax on unrealized capital gains.
As Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and others repeatedly call out high net worth individuals like Elon Musk over this definition of fair share, he has responded to these claims and brought up an important part of consideration, which is that of capital allocation and what it represents.
At a certain point, really what you're doing is capital allocation. So it's not money for personal expenditures, what you're doing is capital allocation. And it does not make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill in capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government.
Today we have so many problems to solve. The pandemic and associated lockdowns have caused more than 6 million people to lose their jobs in the US. The regressive effects of inflation have kicked in across the country, and we have so many differing opinions on sovereignty, taxation, and money. All of these beg the question, what is money? In this two-part series, we'll break down the concepts of money, and in this video, we'll explore the history of money, money's properties and functions, an example of money in a simple society, banking and credit, and finally, we'll circle back to wealth and capital allocation to help make sense of current issues. Part 2 in this video series will cover inflation and how money is created. Money is a fascinating topic, and it serves as a measuring stick for so much of society. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's dive in.
It's just money. It's made up. Pieces of paper with pictures on it so we don't have to kill each other just to get something to eat.
History often repeats itself, and the lens of history offers rich insight into understanding money and how we arrive to the present day. Early civilizations used shells, commodities, and coins, and gold and silver have served as a monetary base in various capacities. All of these are precursors to what we know today as fiat paper money that can be printed or created at will. The history of money is thousands of years old, but we're going to look back at 4 key events of the last 100 or so years that stand out in history, especially in the United States. The Federal Reserve was established in 1913 under President Woodrow Wilson. Bank runs were still a problem, and the Federal Reserve was created as a central bank to provide elasticity, offer financial stability, and act as a lender of last resort to member banks. World War I was the first test for our Federal Reserve as our nation's central bank. The United States struggled to finance and pay for World War I, and the Federal Reserve stepped up to help market and facilitate the purchase of war bonds to help with the war. The United States was still recovering from the Great Depression of 1929, and in an act to reduce unemployment and jumpstart the economy, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act in 1934. This act did a few things. First, it nationalized all gold by ordering Federal Reserve banks to turn over their supply to the U.S. Treasury in return for gold certificates. Second, the act regulated ownership of all monetary gold in the United States. And third, the act authorized the president to establish the gold value of the dollar by proclamation. The day after signing this act, Franklin Delano Roosevelt did exactly that, as he raised the price of gold from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce. Let's break this down a bit more because there's a lot to unpack here. Let's say that on Monday, you go down to the bank and trade in your money for gold. You give $10,000 to the bank. Gold is convertible at $20.67 per troy ounce, and they give you 33 pounds of gold bars in return. You've got the gold, and you are on your way. The next day, however, after this proclamation in 1934, you go down to the bank, and surprise, gold is now worth $35 per ounce. The same $10,000 you are looking to redeem is now only worth 20 pounds of gold. Oh, and by the way, you are by law required to turn your gold to the US Treasury. This is what happened, and overnight FDR devalued the US dollar by 40% through this inflationary measure. Does this sound familiar to anything we may have today? By 1944, the US held nearly 3/4 of the world's supply of gold. As World War II was coming to close, the Allied nations came together for a meeting in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The war had suspended gold standards to help finance the war, and many of the countries were now looking for a new international monetary system that would ensure exchange rate stability, prevent competitive devaluations, and promote economic growth. The Bretton Woods Agreement was put in place in 1944, and it established a fixed conversion of USD to gold at $35 an ounce. It established the US dollar as the settlement currency in international trade, and all of the countries promised they would maintain a fixed exchange rate between their currency and the US dollar. However, there are always ulterior motives at play. Throughout the 1960s, France was redeeming its USD for gold at the fixed exchange rate established at Bretton Woods. This was actually reducing US economic influence. Gold was seen as more valuable than USD, and with France buying up all of the supply at a fixed conversion rate, the United States was unable to back up all other US dollars at this rate. In 1971, President Nixon temporarily ended the convertibility of USD to gold. This transitory measure became permanent, and just 5 years later, all references of convertibility of gold to USD were removed.
Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Even in the United States, one of the most powerful countries with the world's reserve currency, we see that power and politics have a massive influence over money supply and creation. The rules of the game, exchange rates, and attempts at price controls can all change at the whims of politicians' views. Today, 1.1 billion people live in countries with double-digit inflation, and Turkey is just one of the latest examples of a country where inflation soars above 30%. We saw the brief history of money, but what exactly is it? Throughout history, money has existed to serve 4 functions. Number 1 is a medium of exchange, meaning we can all agree on something beyond barter. Number 2, a unit of account. We can track who owes what. Number 3, a store of value, meaning that money will retain its value. This has been a problem with the US dollar as exposed by our latest inflation rates. And number 4, a standard for deferred payment, meaning we can all agree how payment in the future will be accepted. Money must also have properties to serve society, namely fungibility. Its individual units must be capable of mutual substitution. Your dollar is the same as my dollar. Durability. Your dollar won't fall apart in your pocket. Divisibility. Your $20 bill can be broken down in order to buy items at the dollar store. Portability. You don't have to carry around massive gold bars everywhere you go. Cognizability. We can easily spot a real dollar. Scarcity. Its supply and circulation must be limited. And lastly, money must be somewhat stable. The US dollar has become the world's reserve currency due to its stability. No business or individual wants to engage in transactions with money that cannot be relied upon or predicted in its future value. So back to the question, what is money? Today we carry credit cards and have online banking, so we may not even have paper bills, much less any gold coins. But what is important are the properties of money and what backs these digital transactions. Does the money we all agree upon reflect the properties and functions of a strong currency? Something that is a store of value over time, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account? Or is it something anyone can artificially print or confiscate on a whim? As we reflect on these properties and functions of money, let's look at money in an example simple society. In this society, we'll imagine there are 4 people: a farmer, a carpenter, a tailor, and a toy maker. The farmer grows and sells food, the carpenter makes houses, the tailor makes clothes, and the toy maker, you guessed it, makes toys. In this hypothetical society, we will also imagine that there is a fixed money supply of 1,000 gold coins, denoted here with a $sign, and each person has 250 coins to their name. Let's take a look at some hypothetical transactions they make over the course of year 1. The carpenter spends $100 on clothes from the tailor, he spends $100 on food from the farmer, and spends $50 on toys from the toy maker. The farmer spends $100 on a new barn, spends $100 on food, spends $50 on toys. The tailor spends $100 on a new house, spends $100 also on toys, and $50 on food. Finally, the toy maker spends $100 on food from the farmer, $100 on clothes from the tailor, and $50 on a new room in their house from the carpenter. At the end of year 1, we have a total of $1,000 in gold coins in transactions, and we have a few important metrics to consider. We saw $1,000 of sales of final goods between all parties throughout the year. This represents the gross domestic product, the GDP, or final value of all items sold. The total money supply of this society is $1,000. This represents all of the money printed in circulation. Because this total money supply was spent or turned over once throughout the year, the velocity of money ratio is 1. But what happens if better technology is introduced? In year 2, by wild inspiration and a stroke of genius, the toy maker figures out how to make a cell phone. This miraculous feat of engineering now ensures higher efficiency for everyone with the phone's vast suite of mobile applications. The carpenter can more accurately create floor plans, the tailor can make more precise measurements, and the farmer can plan crop yields more efficiently. Everyone can communicate more easily, all because of this phone and its applications. Naturally, everyone wants this new technology, so in year 2, everyone decides to pay whatever money they have saved for a new cell phone. In year 2, we start with everyone paying $250 of their saved coins to the toy maker for a new cell phone. Now the toy maker has more money and wants to splurge a bit. He hires the carpenter for a new room in the house and pays $500. The carpenter then throws a large party for the town and spends lavishly on new clothes. The tailor in turn buys higher quality crops and foods for a feast. In year 2, with the advent of the cell phone, everyone is now exchanging money more quickly as more high quality goods and efficiency enter the system. In year 2, suppose we have $2,000 worth of transactions. This implies a GDP of 2,000 and a velocity of money factor of 2. As we can see, the new technology increased GDP and made the economy better for everyone. Of course, there are limitations to this. At some point, there is enough high-quality food for everyone, so perhaps the demand for food levels out and prices eventually come down. And if everyone wants a new house, there is a limit on how much can be supplied immediately, so the price of a house may rise. But with continued ingenuity, the carpenter will incorporate machinery or other technology into his practice and unlock efficiency for everyone, balancing supply and demand in a new equilibrium price. In this way, we can see that even with a fixed money supply, the velocity of money can increase with more technology, and the value that a member of this society receives increases over time. The pie of goods that an amount of money can buy increases as technology and process improvements add to the value of society in a deflationary manner. This is how we evolve from a village of 4 people with some basic food, shelter, and clothing to a society that has housing, a wide variety of food, sewage, electricity, computers, cars, cell phones, and the like. Of course, with more people, this becomes more complex, but output is the driving factor of any economy, and increased output is largely dependent on innovation and technology. To further drive this home, Think of today's society when compared to early medieval days if we still only had 1,000 gold coins in circulation. Those coins would have to change hands many times and could buy a massive amount of goods, even when adjusted per capita for our larger population. The economy is not a zero-sum game, but rather is ever expanding as new innovation and markets are unlocked. And with no increase in money supply, the value of the goods you could obtain would increase every year. There are so many tangible examples of this. Our World in Data has some fantastic examples linked in the description below, and the idea of just books and the associated knowledge sharing serve as one example of exponential growth through time. As we saw in the simple society, the more that innovation and technology improve, the larger the overall pie of the economy is, and the more we are able to get with our money. In many cases, that new innovation requires large capital outlays that will pay off after time. For example, a new water pipe that will eliminate the need for daily trips to the river, an oil rig that will provide new strategic petroleum reserves, a train that will reduce commute times for everyone, a new school that can educate all of the children, a new apartment complex that will house many families, a new tractor that will harvest more crops, and so on and so on. All of these examples of capital outlays have varying levels of business risk, and some would be taken care of by the government in a real society. In either case, with good insight and planning, all of these things can be great opportunities to expand the pie of the economy and be a net good for driving innovation, technology, and opportunity for everyone. Enter the world of debt, credit, and lending.
It's all just the same thing over and over. We can't help ourselves.
With another simple example of our primitive society, we can see that extending credit and taking on debt can be a way to pull forward and enable economic growth. Suppose in our simple society, the tailor has a way to create a new sewing device. The device will cost $300 but will produce 10x the number of clothes at a higher quality. The tailor convinces the carpenter, farmer, and toy maker to loan her the money, $100 each, and promises to pay them back 1 year later at a 10% interest rate, $110 each. The tailor uses the capital to invest in the new machine and is quickly able to create higher quality clothes faster. She pays back the loan and everyone has a chance to get higher quality clothes. All the while, the same money supply is present in the simple society, still 1,000 gold coins. The credit extended and debt taken was used to facilitate investment and again grow the entire economic pie for everyone. Now, of course, too much debt, or debt that is not used for innovation or economic growth, can eventually lead to recessions or even depressions. But the ability to allocate capital toward innovation is crucial for growing the economic pie for everyone. Through all of these examples, we see money as a tool, something that can be used as a medium of exchange to help pull forward economic growth. Today, it is the accumulation of money and wealth that seems to have spurred on so much of the political divisiveness we see. Wealth is often associated with what money can buy. We see the yachts, the private planes, the multiple beach houses, and we are upset that one person can unfairly have so much money. And the idea that wealth can be transferred across so many generations begs question of what fair share means and what too much is. This is a valid question and deserves its own video on the topic. However, the idea of taxing unrealized gains infringes on the right to control one's own business. Elon Musk has a reported net worth of $270 billion through his ownership stakes of Tesla and SpaceX. This ownership stake is only worth that much because the market values it as such. We can even see the valuation models that large institutions, such as ARK Invest, use in their assumptions that are reflected in the share value today. If Tesla fails to grow deliveries, hit production targets over the next decade, or fails to roll out full self-driving vehicles, Elon Musk's net worth will be dramatically reduced. If this were ever the case, should Elon then be entitled to a tax rebate? As Elon alluded to earlier, wealth is often an ownership stake in a company, where that ownership reflects the governance structure and ability to allocate capital into new programs to drive forward the company. By taxing unrealized gains, the government is effectively transferring ownership and thereby the rights to future capital allocation from Elon to the government. As we have seen, the economic pie increases for everyone when we increase productivity, and Elon has demonstrated an incredible skill for driving investment and increasing productivity throughout his entire career. Does this mean government or taxes should not exist? Of course not. It is important we have taxation mechanisms to ensure a framework that benefits everyone, and it may be especially necessary to introduce new taxes in our future of vast automation and artificial intelligence so we don't exacerbate our growing economic divide. But even if the government took all of the company ownership and wealth from Elon, some $200 billion, the funds would only cover the federal government for 14 days at our current spending levels. And this of course assumes that shares don't plummet in this dramatic new overhaul of governmental control. It was only 2 generations ago when our government went off of the gold standard, and today we see the government printing trillions of dollars and proposing more control on capital allocation at the same time. What do you think of the proposed plans for a wealth tax? Please add your thoughts to the comment section below, and be sure to like and subscribe if this video has been helpful. Money is such an interesting topic, and we are just scratching the surface. Join next week for part 2 on how money is created and its impact on inflation we are seeing in the world. See you next time.